Okay, I've seen students annotate poems a lot, especially in these anthologies. And what always amazes me is how much they just start to feature spot. Oh, well, there's a simile, here's some abstract nouns, here's a rhetorical question, here's an imperative verb. And what they miss, that's kind of, to use a cliche, this is kind of missing the forest for the trees, or missing the trees for the forest. I don't know which one it is. But basically, um, these people don't really get a sense of the narrative arc of this poem. As I said, the poet's really putting on a mask, and what I want to look at is not only what's being said, um, and the images that are being portrayed, but I want to see if there are gaps and things that we could put more scrutiny on and put more pressure on to ask ourselves questions that Duffy only suggests and doesn't answer. Okay, so let's start. Everything begins with just a suspicion. Doubt, jealousy grew in my mind. The speaker isn't sure. And this is something that I think I only learned last year when trying to perform the poem with some students, was the speaker does not know for sure. And that is, if you've ever been in a situation where someone's cheated on you, this is surely the worst part, where you don't know and you start to feel like you're going crazy. And this horrible green state of mind of jealousy, the green-eyed monster that grows inside of you, can indeed start taking you over. And that's what happens here. And what happens is it turns her hairs to filthy snakes. And it's not as if my hair were filthy snakes. She says literally, they became filthy snakes. But then she employs a simile, as though my thoughts hissed and spat on my scalp. So, did her hairs turn to snakes? Or is it as if her hissing, spitting thoughts have turned her hairs to snakes? She clearly starts to have a physical deterioration. Her bride's breath, which should be sweet, is soured, stank in the gray bags of my lungs. It's stagnant. Smell. We always think of Medusa in terms of sight, but actually, Duffy's evoked the idea of the smell itself of a monster. Foul-mouthed is both the smell, but also swearing, poor talking, fanged. This for me suggests she's biting at her husband. She's crying because there are tears in her eyes, but these tears are bullets. Is she using her tears? You see, there's so much we just don't know. It's only suggested. I think only on reading the poem a number of times do I start to see there might be more going on here. She asks, "Are you terrified?" Now, just there, that could be seen as quite plaintive, quite sad, quite pathetic. But she changes the tone immediately. Be terrified. Now, this is why, even though this poem is not written in slang, it's really important that you practice reading poems out loud. If you start getting the rhythms and patterns and pauses, you're going to not only hear the character, you're going to start getting a lot more meaning. So, there are bullet tears in my eyes. Are you terrified? Be terrified. It's you I love. Perfect man, Greek god, my own. But I know you'll go, betray me, stray from home. So better by far from me if you were stone. I hear the movement going from pathetic to aggressive. And then here, pathetic again. And here, resigned. Those sounds are what I hear, and that's how I read that stanza. It's you I love. Why does she think this guy's perfect? We get this idea of I mean, the idea here comes to mind of a perfect Greek statue. Some sort of six-pack, tall, flowing Perseus of some sort. He's something she owns. But she's aware that he'll go away, betray her, stray, you get that internal line, stray from home. Now, what I thought originally when reading the poem is obviously he's a player, he's leaving her. But now it's not so obvious to me. Is she paranoid? I have to ask myself. Is she? I just don't know. I just don't know. And that not knowing, far from making the poem weaker, actually recommends it. It makes it, for me, more interesting. Now, she threatens, in a way, since he's going to go, better if he was just a statue. Better she look at him, better she turn him to stone, to keep him frozen, so she could adore him as this perfect Greek statue, rather than him go stray and betray. And now she starts to look at things in her world, and notice how we go from small to bigger things. First she glances at a bee, and this bee's buzzing around, and in contrast to its active, light, energized buzzing, it becomes a dull, gray pebble. And what's it do? It falls to the ground. What a wonderful image. I can really see that magnificent little insect, yellow and black, moving very quickly here and there, and then all of a sudden, all the color shot out of it. A little piece of stone just falling into utter banality. Next thing she glances at is a singing bird. A handful of dust gravel spattered down. Here, I think she's giving us the image or the effect of the bird itself growing silent and smashing to pieces. That's what I see. That's why the dusty gravel. The splattered is interesting because I think with an organic image like a bird, it's splattering, would invest it with blood and its innards coming out. But here, as these organic items are being squeezed of life, they're turned into dust and pebbles. But still, that verb splatters helps recall what it was. So those were glances. Now we have some looks. And what do these looks do? We see a cat get looked at, and it shatters a bowl of milk. A snuffling pig gets looked at. I mean, you know, a poet like Duffy, it's going to not be enough, really, for this character to just see a bee. I want to hear that bee buzzing. I want to hear that pig snuffling. I can really hear it. Its nose going into the ground. And those adjectives do so much work, I think, here. And when she looks at the pig, a boulder rolled in a heap of shit. It's swearing, very audacious for a GCSE poem, but of course pigs root around in mud and filth, or they're purported to, and now this beautiful, alive animal with its nose burrowing and snuffling into the ground turns into just a boulder and just rolled in shit. This isn't simply the Medusa turning things to rock. That'd be so boring, or stone. We have boulders, we have pebbles, bricks, we have a variety of different stone, and we have the idea of the life being yanked from these items. What's interesting in the Medusa parable, or in the story, in the mythology, you have to look at the Medusa in order to become petrified. But here, she's changed it. Medusa herself is the active agent. When she looks at things, these things turn to stone. And this is an important inversion, I think, as we move to the end of the poem. When Perseus defeated Medusa, he did it by using a shield that Athena gave him. And we're going to see that shield maybe mentioned in a second. And a sword made by the god's blacksmith, Hephaestus. And what he did was he used the mirror, he used this reflective shield as a mirror, and he could look at the Medusa without risk of turning to stone. And he used that as a way of guiding his sword to be beheading her. And he captured her, and he used her as a weapon. Here, the poet in the mask of Medusa looks in the mirror, and she sees, and she stares. She's moved from glancing and looking, and now she's into staring. And she can stare at herself, because reflections don't turn to stone, and what she sees is love gone bad. Such a simple phrase, but it really reveals what this poem might be about, that love hasn't really worked out for this character, and we have to ask why. And here we see this Gorgon, this monster. When she saw other monsters, she stared at them, and she was able to turn a dragon into a volcano with a mouth of fire spewing. You see, she's gone from bees to dragons. And her strength at increasing the damage grows throughout this poem. On the way there, though, she does take a pause to look at herself. And of course she doesn't turn to stone, but she does, for a moment, notice what has happened to herself. I think that stanza is really important, and you might want to think about that. What has actually happened? What does this character think has happened? And before putting on the mask, or as the mask falls, what is this person trying to say? So we have Medusa here alone in the penultimate stanza, and she notices this man that she thinks of as her betrayer. And he is cast in the role of Perseus. And she notices him coming, and instead of a heart, he has a shield. So no heart. Instead of a tongue, he has that sword made by Hephaestus. And then something different. And your girls. This suggests infidelity. But again, we have to ask ourselves, or is she paranoid? That's what makes the poem interesting for me. I don't know for sure. What is the effect of that repetition? Your girls, your girls. Well, again, I think it's really important the way you read it. With a shield for a heart and a sword for a tongue, and your girls, your girls. In that repetition, in that small pause in repetition, I hear this pain. I hear a woman who sees her husband always with other women, but not women. She sees them as young girls. She sees herself as old, decayed, gray, stinking, and she sees her husband always with young, youthful women, perhaps girls, who she considers girls. And it upsets her, and it reminds her of her distance, and we really see that in these following lines. She asks, wasn't I beautiful? Wasn't I fragrant? Did I always smell stinky and foul-mouthed? Wasn't I young and nice-smelling and beautiful? Well, at one point, she asks. And now we come to this ambiguous last line. Look at me now. Now, this line, I think, can go a few ways. One is, if we isolate just the ending of the poem, the poet's asking someone, this man, us, someone, look, wasn't there a time where I was beautiful, young, smelt beautiful, smelt wonderfully? Look at me now. I'm this disgusting old person, paranoid, angry, withered, lonely, alone. On the other hand, if we continue the metaphor of Medusa, if she is Medusa, and her husband has actually betrayed her, Perseus, her husband now, Perseus, come to destroy him, strangely accompanied with girls. The last line is something terrifying. Going back into the original myth, Medusa has to be looked at directly for you to turn to stone. And she is asking and demanding that Perseus, or this man, her husband, look at her. Look at her as a way of seeing what she's become, perhaps for his fault. Look at her so that he turns to stone. Look at her so she can hurt him. And here, it may be important to suggest that the figure of Medusa has been very crucial to the history of art in terms of painting and sculpture as a kind of representation of particularly what the sculptor does, which is turn the real world into stone. But the power of looking and the power of being looked at is extremely present within this mythical character of Medusa, and is one that hasn't left us at all. And the way Caroline Duffy has taken this myth and twisted it up into a jealousy story is one thing. But what makes this poem sophisticated, in my opinion, is that the character themselves reveals paranoia, worry, perhaps fictionalization, a propensity towards imagining, all of that within the language and imagery of this poem. The sound is one of aggression. Be terrified. Look at me now. And it's, while also being ambiguous. What has happened to this person? Why have things gone so wrong? What is this man about? What has this man done to suggest that that he's been cheating? I think this is a poem that pays multiple readings, and it pays to really dig into the language and look for clues as to what might be going on.